company that we're working on a movie, y'all. I'm so excited starring myself.
I'm so excited, grateful that you're going to be a part of that project.
Yes, I don't want to tell you guys too much, but it involves basketball and Aubrey Plaza, so you can imagine some comedy. So keep a lookout for that. We'll keep you guys posted. Well, you know, in talking about black women, black people, culture, setting trends. What was so important about it for you to create this book to talk about how to own what we put out to the world?
Ooh, can everybody hear?
It is echoey. Is it okay for you guys?
I want to make sure these mics are working before we start talking. But why did I do the book? As we all know, how we show up in the world says a whole lot about sometimes how we're treated, what kind of respect we have, and during my 8 years as First Lady, I made it a point not to talk about fashion because I didn't want my 8 years to be just about the shoes I wore or the dress I was in. I wanted people to see who I was and what I was doing. And as a woman, a lot of times we are talking about how we look first before what we say.
Absolutely.
And so, but fashion was a big part of what I did. I mean, I made it a point to think really strategically about how I showed up. So the book is now my opportunity to share that journey because I do love fashion and I did make a point of thinking through strategically how I needed to show up in the world as the first Black First Lady. And so the book takes you on that journey.
I love that because the look is not only being defined by what you look like on the outside, but the agency you have with how you show up and how much that is allowed to define who you are. So there's many different levels to that. I want to, as we go down that journey of the look with you, I want to start at the top. Take me back to the south side of Chicago. You know, when we think about your personal style back then, when you were Michelle Robinson, you know, what was your look? How did you get up and get dressed? What did you think about that shit?
You know, girl, when I was growing up, my style was broke. It was just broke work girl. You know, my style was a lot of no, right? Because Marion Robinson, my mother, she pinched a penny. You know, so she wasn't really into fashion. So I was one of those young girls who was always, I wish, you know, if I had the money, I could, you know, if I really had full control over my own look, I could dream about what I wanted to wear. But we didn't grow up being able to afford much of anything. You know, we were shopping at Sears and Roebuck's, you know, for animals. What was on sale?
I remember Sears Tower.
Oh my God, I was so sick of Sears growing up. But I grew up on the South Side with a ton of fashion. I mean,
Who were some of your inspirations?
they were all the girls in the neighborhood. You know, I mean, I was always looking up to that girl just older than me. You know, the little cutie that be sitting on the sidelines at my brother's basketball games. I was like 10 years old and she was 13 or 14 coming in with her Gloria Vanderbilt jeans and her chains laid. You know, I knew what fashion and style was, but when I was young, we just couldn't afford it. I used to always want to wear a pair of white patent leather go-go boots. Because I was watching like Christy Love, Foxy Brown. I mean, those fine black women in those little mini skirts and those boots that just zipped up.
I mean, and speaking of the look, I think that also feels like power. When I think about those kinds of boots, I think about an afro, I think about a leather jacket, a little pepper to it.
Oh my God.
That makes me think about that.
Indeed, maybe that's what I was thinking. I was channeling some hit Christy Love. I was going to shoot somebody up. But Marion Robinson wasn't having that. so I was stuck with my little rubber boots.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we see what is represented on television or music, what's actually possible for us in our day-to-day life, especially when we think about people that are minority. People might think, oh, a White House is the first experience dealing with big institutions, but obviously it's not. We were in college at Princeton and Harvard, being in predominantly white spaces was something that you were very, well navigated. But when you think about those early years of yourself in college, what role did fashion or your look play in when you first entered those spaces?
I was probably more focused on the academics back then. I mean, I went to college broke. We were on financial aid. I was on work study. I had the clothes that I had, I came with my Levi's and my polo shirts and my Levi jeans jacket. I just didn't have the time or the money to focus too much on what I look like. And I think that's true for a lot of college kids. I mean, you're away from home for the first time. You're trying to figure out where to get your hair done in a white space. I mean, that was like a big deal going to a white school in a white neighborhood. It was like, where am I getting my hair done? I was more focused on that than I was what I was getting, what I was wearing. But my focus in college was trying to make sure I showed up and got those grades. So there were classmates of mine who came from more affluence, who came with the preppy look, and they had all the clothes, and some of these kids were black. But most of the black kids at Princeton when I was going, we were all just trying to get through. We weren't really focused on, we didn't have time to focus on our look.
I really, really relate to this, especially when I think about me in the early years coming up in the industry. Where you think that, I mean, obviously, I had glam and fashion, all that thing was thought of, but I didn't always have a lot of money to have the best styling, to get the best clothes. So my way of surviving or being able to thrive in those spaces was just being really good at the job. It's just like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do so good, and you're not going to think about if I have on the time or if I have on the outfit or whatever it is. At what point did you start being able to even open yourself up to thinking about how fashion would support you on your journey to success?
Really wasn't until I started campaigning for Barack in the presidential race. Because the truth is that while I was a professional, went to law school, worked in a big firm, I did a lot of jobs. Once again, my focus was on the work. My focus was on the career, and I always thought the outfit, I wore what I needed to wear to get the job done. Right, so when I was a corporate attorney back in the 90s when I was practicing, we had those ugly women's suits, these 90s suits with the big shoulder pads. You had to look like a man that was trying to look like a woman. Everything fashion wasn't a part of it. So I was just going to wear the uniform that I needed to get the job done. And so when I first went out on the campaign trail in Iowa, fashion became an important part of something I had to think about because I had to be organized. And if you think about what I was doing when I had 2 little kids, I was still working a full-time job. I was vice president of community affairs at the University of Chicago hospitals. I would campaign 3 days a week. I would leave Chicago at 5 in the morning because I wanted to make sure I'd see the kids. I'd get on the first flight out of Chicago into Iowa. I'd land in Iowa, campaign all day, and that would mean I might do 5 rallies, 3 fundraisers, and I'd do as much as I could to get to the last flight out of Iowa to get back to Chicago in time for dinner with the girls. So I was usually just wearing one outfit.
It was Steve Jobs.
It was one of those, it had to be like, it's a sweater, it's a vest, it's a fundraiser, and I'm at a fair. It had to be versatile for the whole day. But then I realized at this pace, I didn't have time to think about clothes. And that was the first time I met a designer. This woman, Maria Pinto, I was introduced to her. She was a young designer in Chicago. And that was the first time go to her. She had my measurements. This is when I was wearing those sheath dresses that were silk, sleeveless. She made those. Those were Maria Pinto designs. And I could go to her, get fitted, have a set of clothes that I didn't have to think about. So Keke, when I was, fashion was something that I was trying not to think about. Right? I had to be organized enough and have enough resources so that I could put on clothes, not have to think about it, know that I look good and look presentable, because this is when people were starting to write about me, right?
And that makes me curious of when you understood the power of it. And maybe it didn't even come up first positively. Maybe it was the power of seeing how people were writing up about you because of like, you remember a moment in time?
Oh,